All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
We are making up for last week's Wheel of Time, so you'll get two of those this week. And we're doing this first so we can get it out there, and we'll do our social episode sometime later. But we're going to go chapters 16 through 19. So for me, it's about 60-ish pages. Uh, but there's a lot that goes on in there. There's a lot of
Yeah.
scene switches and oh, Matt. But it's
hmm
important. The Matt section is important because it's finally the reunion.
Yeah. And uh yeah, we end with some Matt, and then we were there was quite a bit of us when I was down there, and we were sitting around being old men yelling at the clouds, almost literally, because we got ran back inside from the rain. Um Grumbling about Matt. Uh, but there is some good stuff here too. Uh, I was trying to remember back. I should have gone back to Knife of Dreams and read the Loyal chapter to see how close he got the point of view of Loyal. But it starts off on chapter 16
Well, it's just
with
like everything Sanderson is when he does okay. Everything Sanderson when he does okay, he kind of got the gist of it. There are words in there that are key words for Loyal's character and everything, but then the depth behind it just doesn't hit right.
yeah, 80% of the time it works 90% of the time.
Hmm.
So when he is actually on target, he's clustering those shots pretty good. But he never really makes a bullseye. I think the closest he comes to really hitting a bullseye is probably that Rand and Tam sparring section that I think is probably his best section from these three books from his books is probably that chunk there because it's a pretty significant chunk both in terms of word count, but then also content of
Hmm.
what's going on. I think that's probably the closest he comes to really hitting a bullseye and making me forget that I'm not reading Jordan's words. I'm reading Jordan's
Well,
ideas.
there was bullseye moments even in this little section where I'm looking at it and he could have done without uh, the first half a page of that and then just kind of went into the fight with none of the inner thoughts
Mm,
that are there. And then we have inner thoughts during the fight that were actually good. Like when he's talking about, they should be enjoying the peace of the steading. They should be able to build, sing, and grow. And that was actually the biggest source of his anger.
mm,
And I think it's Wheel of Time stuff that I've talked about it that I identify with that because I'm very, very, very slow to anger. But when I'm there, I actually get double anger because I'm angry at being angry because I don't like it. And if someone's pushed me to that point, it's like you get double now because you put me in this space that I don't like to
yeah.
be in.
You know what? I was trying to put my finger on what I because for the most part, this opening section with Loyal, the opening of chapter 16, which is page 319 for me here in the first edition hardback, and I mean credit where it's due, the guy can turn a phrase, and a silence like screaming, it's just an awesome phrase. So there is some good there, like the chapter title and then where it comes from in the moment, but also right at the beginning, I like this kind of opening inner monologue that Loyal is having, and he he's thinking about humans because he so often does, and this is in keeping with when we first meet him, and he's talking to Rand about why he left and why humans fascinate him. Um, Hastiness. There were things to learn from hastiness. He was starting to wonder if he had learned that particular lesson too well. And this is something we were talking about, and we've talked about before, is just emotions aren't bad. It's what you do with those emotions and how far you take them. And are you using your emotions or are your emotions using you? And so the the plotting stoicism of the Ogier, there's worth to that. But on the other hand, you're sitting here debating for months and months and months and months of whether you should just leave. And then it takes Loyal to come along and kind of slap some sense into you because he has that degree of hastiness that he has learned from the humans is, hey, yeah, worry that it's, I like this worry that he's learned the lesson too well, but the acknowledgement of, you know, there's worth here. There's something here. But so I like the
It's the
opening.
wisdom of being able to separate hastiness
Yes.
from urgency.
Mm,
Urgency is important. Hasty is actually acting too quickly without urgency, not taking the
mm,
time to do the right thing. But when it's urgent, you do the thing. So we use language to separate these things out.
um, but then it kind of
Sorry, I'll bring
keeps
those up while
going.
you're talking.
It kind of keeps going and becomes a little bit meh. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And it's much the same problem that he has with Matt that you just kind of made me think of here of the build up to the actual fighting and versus the internal monologue that Loyal is having during the fight. And that part works better. And I think the lead up needed to be, as so often happens with Sanderson, needed to be about half as long. And
Mhm.
I think I don't know how much of it is his style, like that's why I keep nagging my kids to read it so they can tell me what they think because I have trouble remembering the stuff I've read about Sanderson, which I think tells you what I think about his stuff. But I don't know how much of it is this is just his style and how much of it he's trying too hard because he's trying to emulate someone else.
Well, that's an important point you just said about not remembering his stuff. And
Mm,
that's the difference between enjoyable versus really good. Because he writes in a way that is enjoyable in the moment in some cases. In
mm,
fact, he tries to overdo the enjoyable, but those things that are just momentarily enjoyable are very rarely the ones that stick. I mean, that's what got us on this whole thing in the beginning is because Jordan has so much that we can read into that's more than just, oh, I liked it. I liked reading it in the moment.
mhm. Um, oh, then there's a little bit of Gallad and some of his men watching the Ogier,
Well, let's take the break in
which
the action there to do the comments.
okay,
There's only three of them. So we
I'd
can
forgotten all about that.
Okay, so
All right.
I'll start with Scott. Welcome back, Scott. Women won't answer when you ask what they like for dinner, but if you decide without asking them, they resent it. So I've learned the hack.
That's actually a good point. Is
Yeah.
okay, don't get frustrated when you don't get an answer. Just expect it, but understand that you need to ask and then be ready to make a decision.
So the hack I've learned is you tell them, guess where we're going for dinner, and then you just say the first thing they answer, say, how'd you know? And they have officially chosen where dinner was.
I'll have to see that one works for me.
Let's see. I like that Moraine said compassion was a weakness, but Rand didn't agree. Yes,
Hmm.
yes. It shows growth of Rand, and one of the painful parts of growth is when mentors become partners, and you can see cracks in their advice. Moraine is still wise and useful, but her word is no longer gospel. It's a good moment. They all need each
Hmm.
other. They cover each other's blind spots. Yes, this is one of the hard parts about parenting because there is a moment in time where you know everything. And then there's a moment of time where you know nothing. And you hope your child, mine isn't there yet because he's 14, so I'm at the know nothing stage, where they put it together and say, oh, he knows some things. And we're hoping we get there. Any comments on that before I move to the last one?
Nope, I like that.
Imagine the next dragon reborn in the fourth era being born into a royal family. but there are rumors she's actually the kid of Queen's fitness instructor and not the king. Okay, so this is when we were talking about Millar and the rumors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Queen's fitness instructor and not the king. Plus, he's haunted by the memories of a lowly sheep herder, and his character arc is to disregard the stinky, lowly common man and become a true loyalty, a god among men, god emperor. Oh yeah, that would be an interesting twist. Which actually, you get a little bit of that impression about Lews Therin Talamon.
Mm.
Especially when you get some demanded point of views, you actually Jordan he very subtly did it, and we've discussed that I pay a lot of attention to the thoughts, the motivations behind the Forsaken. That Lews Therin Talamon was an asshole.
Yeah, you get some of that from these Rand scenes in this book.
Hmm.
Is, yeah, I did the best I could. I did what seemed right at the time, but ultimately I failed, and I failed because of me. That's why I needed to be the sheep herder this time.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder why Ideals has to come after me, bro. Why you got to come after me, fitness instructor? I can't have kids anymore. We spent the money on that. Or maybe I can have the chosen one, that 1 in 40 million chance that they say you still have. Hmm. Plot twist. It is the
Plot
fitness
twist.
instructor's kid, even though he had a vasectomy and it came out black.
I'm not writing that.
It wasn't even the fitness instructor.
Oh boy.
It was one of the guys from the legal team.
Uh, now you've just derailed my thought. Where was I? Oh yeah. All
We're
right.
done with
So,
comments. Back to Gallad.
I don't have any thoughts on Galad. It's just a nice little interlude to break the action before we switch to
Well,
Rand.
this was one of the moments where I took a note, like a knee-jerk reaction, and then I had to take a second note as I read a few more paragraphs action, because I actually liked, for me it's 348, but it's, I mean, is it whatever, one page more
Hmm.
from what you said. Uh, Galad having to be Mr. Obvious to the indoctrinated person, you
Hmm.
know, they're fighting with us, dude. And I was like, okay, good. That's all. That's a good little moment because it was very candid, and it was one of those, yeah, these people are indoctrinated. But then he kept going, and the guy has a long paragraph long argument about it, and it's like
Oh yeah.
it's like, no, it was good. Just a little one liner reminding the White Cloaks that, oh yeah, we've been indoctrinated. But now they keep having this verbal banter in the middle of battle that they're supposed to be withdrawing from, and I'm like, God,
Uh-huh.
just leave it at the line, dude.
Uh-huh.
Leave it at the line.
And this is one of those instances where I think trying for realism hurts the art,
Mhm.
because no, I can see, I can absolutely believe this moment, because it is hard to crack that shell of indoctrination. And so just pointing it out probably isn't going to be enough for most people, because that dogmatic cage locks tight. But on the other hand, this isn't, you don't have to like give us all the details of, you know, the character getting up and going through his morning routine. You can just say he woke up and he
Mhm.
got ready, right? So let's move on. And
But
in
there's
fact, that
also something to be said about being pulled out of indoctrination in an extreme circumstance,
mm,
where Gallad pointing out, look, they're fighting for us. That should have been enough. You just got done fighting Trollocs, and these other things come in and help you, and you're pulling back in a battle. Okay, you have that, like I said, a knee-jerk reaction. You have that knee-jerk reaction, but then you're slapped into reality again. And we don't
mhm.
get slapped into reality. We get, well, I think that they're just a scheme of some kind, and they're trying to gain our trust so they can break it later. It's like, no, 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 no. Now you've gone too far. Back in camp, maybe you can come back into that moment. But right now, no. And
Well, that leads to my next note, which is then when we switch to Rand's point of view here, he's thinking about his conversation with Tam,
Hmm.
and the conversation with Tam still bounced around in his head. Let go. It wasn't nearly so easy. I like this because this is why I hate motivational books and speakers is it's not that easy. It wasn't nearly so easy. And yet something had lifted from him in speaking with his father. Let go.
You
There
mean
seemed
that
to depth to
Instagram reel I
Rand's
saw
words.
that was this simple move to never have back pain again isn't how it works?
No, no,
Oh
it's
my
not. But so I like that we're acknowledging that there wasn't a switch that was flipped. It's like a dimmer switch. Okay. You moved it off. It's starting to move, but you got to keep turning that switch. You got to keep turning that dial. But he doesn't dwell on it. He makes that point. Rand has that thought, but then he thinks, well, I've got other stuff to focus on right now. And then Moiraine interrupts him and says, "Hey, penny for your thoughts," basically. So
God.
so Sanderson doesn't dwell on it. He just spends a very short paragraph and a half or so, and and then we move on.
Yeah, when she interrupts him, I did like going into the metaphysical because it's something we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kill the Dark One? Is it a good idea to kill the Dark One? We have a kind of a Chesterton fence moment
Mm-hmm.
here. Why does the Dark One even exist? All of that is like, oh no, we don't want him to have his hands on the world directly. What? Without evil, there is no light kind of conversation. And without light, there is no shadow, that kind of thing. So they have a little bit of a. I think he actually, this is where I think he could have gone deeper into the conversation. And I actually would love to believe that Jordan would have gone deeper. And this is something where you could have invoked his conversations with Herod Fell, or even had Min privy to the conversation in there. We have a good moment with her later where she
Mm-hmm.
says something to Ketsuin here in a minute. But yeah,
Yeah.
she would have been a good person to have in this conversation because that would be a good voice for Rand to listen to. It wouldn't be just Moraine. It would be Min saying that actually makes sense because blah 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 blah. You know, so so yeah, I think that could have been a. We talked about trimming in other parts. Well, we could have added a little here and it'd be very relevant and very deep. But I do think that's a part of the story that Sanderson didn't know as much how to deal with it because it's above his pay grade when it comes to the metaphysical. Uh, but again, I just pooped a little bit, but I'll give Sanderson credit. His slightly going into banter worked with the tea, with Moiraine asking for the tea.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a pullback to reality for Rand, and it was very obviously a pullback to reality for Rand and a good little moment.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think where he does it wrong so many times, he kind of got it right in that moment, even though it was the same thing. Same thing, right time. Broken clock, right twice.
So there's an interesting little tidbit here um, before they get to that bit of the conversation, which is Rand thinking about Kalendor and what the
Hmm.
trap is with Kalendor. And I find this interesting because so this is for me, it's on page 323, um, just a page into this Rand scene. And um, where is it? Yeah, so it's the sword's final secret lay bare to him now. It was a trap and a clever one. For this weapon was a sangreal not just for the one power, but for the true power as well. I have so many questions about that. But first of all, um, this is something that uh, Jordan peppered throughout, especially with Rand's story of if this didn't happen, then that wouldn't have happened, so that wouldn't have happened, so that wouldn't happen, so Rand wouldn't have been born. And that is why the one of the names for the pattern is the age lace. If you've ever seen really complicated lace, it is very fun. It's a spider web, very fine, very complicated, lots of connecting parts, lots of spiraling pathways, and I'm assuming that he knows this final bit now because he can now sense the true power because he channeled it. And so I'm assuming when he's holding Kalendor, that's how he knows is because he can feel, oh, holy crap, I could reach out and grab that true power and pull it through Kalendor. And then what would that mean if he did that? Because we don't know exactly how the true power works. We know that the Dark One has control over who can wield it.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't grab hold of it unless he lets you. And I'm assuming he's still dangling it there in front of Rand of, hey, looky here, looky what I got for you. You know, like your dealer after you've been to AA of, hey, come on, don't you want just one more hit? Remember how good it was? Remember how sweet that heroin was?
Mm-hmm.
Remember that feeling? And that's,
Yeah, and
that's
it's
kind of what's going through Rand's
words.
head here.
Words here are important. The true power of the Dark One's essence. Well, how much of that essence has been put into the world
Hmm.
by Moradin already? So actually, if the Dark One wants to be free and the true power itself is his essence, why is it discouraged from any of the Forsaken using it?
My assumption would be because the Dark One, if he's an analog to the devil, the Dark One is itself a created being. And the creator, capital G God, is an uncreated being. And that is the difference between even angels and demons and God.
Hmm.
And so God's power is infinite, literally. Even though the devil, demons, angels have a tremendous amount of power, especially compared to us mere mortals, it is still finite because they are themselves created beings. So I would assume the Dark One doesn't want to drain too much of its essence by letting people wield this power.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case, though. And here's my circumstantial evidence from a fictional novel here. If that was the case, it wouldn't matter if he broke free because there would be a higher power to balance things back out. Because he can actually break the wheel itself by breaking free, I think the wheel is the highest power, and the creator
Hmm.
and the dark one are the different essences that exist within the wheel.
See, I'd always assumed that no, that the Dark One has enough power to do that, to break the wheel. But I'd always assumed that no, the Dark One wouldn't be able to remake the universe in its own image because the way I read,
Well, the problem is its own image is nothingness.
yeah,
I mean, it is the abyss.
it is pure entropy chaos, and so it would just the universe would spiral into oblivion. And then this is where I assumed the creator would step in and say, nope, no, you don't. I'm going to remake the universe. We're starting over. We're starting over again, or maybe again, maybe it's happened before. Is I'm only going to do so much because I created humans to live their own lives. And if this is what they choose, or if they're not up for the task and the Dark One destroys the universe, then I'll bottle it back up and remake the universe and we'll do it again.
See, I kind of look at it like on the metaphysical level, like the Big Bang versus black holes.
Hmm.
If the black hole were to, whatever the essence of black hole is, were to take over, the universe would cease to exist because it's something else that we cannot explain.
Mm-hmm.
And it is nothingness as far as we know, but yet it can basically consume everything. And that's what I think the bore is like a black hole in the universe that is Randland.
Yeah.
And if it was able to be opened up and just extend out, it would basically suck everything to nothingness. Now, what we don't get here because we're in Randland is what happens outside of this world.
Hmm.
You know, we're the only life in the universe according to these books. You know, we don't know what happens to the universe versus just the people in question here. We don't even know what happens in Shanshan. because the breaking didn't happen there.
No, I think the breaking happened everywhere.
Did it?
Yeah. I think we get I feel like that was something Jordan Anderson at one point is that no, the breaking happened everywhere. It's just this is the focal point
Hmm.
of the world, of the action. That's why he,
Well,
as the
because it's where the
author,
boar
was
was.
here, because
Yeah.
this is where the boar was.
Yeah.
And so this is the focal point of the action. This is where the boar is. This is where the dragon is reborn. And so while there's stuff happening in Shara, while there's stuff happening in Sanchin, I'm not going to pay attention to it. And even the Forsaken are only partially paying attention to it. They're
Hmm.
paying attention to it just enough to get resources that they want to bring here to Randland, which is where the main action is happening.
Yeah. Well, back to the black hole analogy, to pull it to what you were talking about, it, when we look at things like the creation of the universe, the black hole is the anomaly. We The reason why we say it with a black hole, it's where God divided by zero, is because it makes no sense. It's if you think about a creation of the universe, that black hole is where, again, God divided by zero, it shouldn't exist, but it's still there. And it's not very happy if you encounter something like that.
Yeah.
And so who knows what happens when the dark one comes to the earth. We don't know what's on the other side of the black hole, just like we don't know what's on the other side of the dark one's breaking of the wheel. But we do know it's not what we're used to as human beings, or everything else on the planet is used to right now.
I was trying to look up because I can't remember who first said black holes so
Did Carl
the
Sagan?
internet seems to think it was Einstein, but I don't think it was him.
Einstein gave us the first, his theory of relativity gave us our first insight into that we don't have to try to explain this from a Newtonian physics standpoint.
Hmm.
In fact, we can't. But I thought relativity didn't even address black
Yeah.
holes. Yeah. It helped us figure out Mercury's orbit of the sun, but it did not help us with black holes.
Yeah. I'm gonna go down that rabbit hole later. All right. Speaking of theological questions, that's actually my next note too.
Okay.
Is
Same section or
it is uh where is it? It's so for me uh it's when it switches to Maureen's point of view. So
okay.
we're in the we're in basically the same scene. Um and it switches to Maureen's point of view after Rand gets her the cup of tea. And um so it's 325 for me. He had become ruler of so much since they had parted, and he was as humble now as when she had first found him in the two rivers, maybe more so. Humble toward me, perhaps, she thought. He believes he can slay the Dark One. That is not the sign of a humble man. Um, Rand al'Thor, such an odd mixture of self-effacement and pride. Did he finally have the balance right? Um, so this was a bit of a trigger for me because um being humble, humility is a major tenet of Christianity that has been horrifically abused. And speaking of quotes, I don't know who said it. I've heard it attributed to C.S. Lewis, but I don't know where this came from. Somebody very wise once said that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. So both Moraine and Sanderson keep on using that word, and I do not think it means what she or he thinks it means. I don't know who's at fault here. I don't know if this is purposefully, Moraine thinking this, or if this is the author through Moraine, but that annoys me. Um, so yes and no, because before, when she first met Rand in the Two Rivers, it was the former that I think as a youth raised in this, you know, very rural, traditional, small town kind of place where everyone goes to church on Sunday and everybody knows everybody's name. I think it was the former. Yeah, that was the kind of humility he had until he got out into the world. And then he got his head swollen and then got popped. And now, as even Moraine acknowledges, he's no youth, he's a man. Well, he's learned a measure of wisdom, which we're about to get to your point on the Cadsuin and Min scene. He's learned a measure of wisdom. And what is that wisdom? He's not thinking less of himself, he's thinking less of him. He's thinking of himself less.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that he thinks he's going to die, which is what Cadsuin's going to talk to him about here in a second, but that is part of it. But there's also an element of I need to make sure things are right and good between me and those I care for most, those that are closest to me. That's why I'm and going to my father and I'm giving him a sword and I'm having a moment with him. I'm going to go to Egwene and I'm going to give her something. I'm going, and yes, Cadsuin is right in what she says to him, but there's also an element of this is a man because I've started rewatching Deadliest Catch because I reactivated my Discovery Plus and I was looking for something to watch and I was like, I haven't watched this in a while. I'm going to start watching this again. And right from the beginning there was a who's the guy who's the guy the song that we broke down and it took forever to
Dax.
Dax.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's this great moment really right from the very beginning because they're setting it up for those of you who don't know, and now I think most people know because the show's been going on for 20 freaking years. But you assume the deadliest job in the world is like a firefighter or military or it's a freaking crab fisherman. It's a Bering Sea fisherman. It's that deadly and dangerous of a job. And all of these men, when they're about ready to shove off, the season's about to start, and there's this rush for the phones to call their family. And all of them in their talking to their wives and their kids and in talking to themselves, each other, and to the camera, they're not worried about dying out there for themselves. All of them are worried about what would that mean for my family? Because that's a man. That's not a boy who can shave. That's a man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going out there. Yes, this is dangerous, but this is how I provide for my family. This is how I take care of my family. And yes, it's dangerous, and I'm worried that I might not come back, but I'm primarily worried because then what would that mean for my family? And that is what Rand is doing here. That is why he is truly humble, is because he's thinking, what does this mean for my people?
Yeah, but Cadsuin is also right in that you can't go into it like that.
Yes.
You have to go into it like you're going to come out because that's like people who blow their savings because they think they're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Like they got a cancer diagnosis or whatever, and they blow their savings, and oh my gosh, a new treatment came out. Oh, now I'm going to live, but I've got nothing.
Yep. Yep.
So it's that balance between not fearing death and actually trying to live. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you try to live, you're going to fight as hard as you can. You still probably will die. But
Well,
it's just like life in general, realistically, because you do things for longevity, even though you know you're going to die.
mm-hmm.
You're not going to live forever. We know that. But you do things to live your best long life. So, I mean, it's just a life lesson in general.
Well, speaking of life lessons, before we get to Cadsuin, we have a pretty lengthy land scene of what's going on with the Borderlander army as it withdraws away
Yeah,
from Tarwin's Gap.
and
And
not
there's
to
a
beat a horse we started with in book 5, but this is where the over grandiosity of the numbers comes in.
Mm.
Because one thing that's been bothering me in these last few books in general, anyways, going into the Great Trolloc invasion is there's almost no food in the Blight. And you're having these massive armies that, yeah, they make raids into the borderlands, but there's no way those raids are supplying enough food for this non-agricultural species of being that only eats the things they kill.
Well, but see, here's where the setup and payoff comes from, is because this is Lan is thinking this. This is part of the last battle.
Yeah,
Is
but
that
to me, it came off as a trying to have a cake and eat it too. We're using this as
Mhm.
a momentary cool moment, but at the same time, because of that, it actually makes it not make sense that this whole horde existed to begin with.
Well, no, because we don't know for certain the life cycle, the gestation cycle of a Trolloc. How do you create a Trolloc? So if
Doesn't he
they,
say it took this would have had to take many, many, many years?
I don't know if it says many years, but remember, one of the reasons the Borderlander army was down in the south is because we were told back whenever that started that the Blight was unnaturally, unusually quiet. That no one could remember a time where the Blight was this quiet. So they had pulled back their their raiding and their attacking, and they were just breeding Trollocs and growing. And we do know from that little, because we got hints of this from Lan and from other Borderlanders, and then we see it in that scene with Luke slash Assam in that town, the town, is that there is actually some measure of civilization in the Blight. So there is, and Lan even thinks here about how, they must have drained all their supplies from the Blight with how huge this horde is, so that they they kind of timed it. The dark kind of timed it so that we can build up this giant horde, and it'll take us this long, and we'll drain all our supplies. But by the time we have drained all our supplies and eaten all of our people and eaten all of our captives, it'll be ready to go anyway, and then we'll have the bodies of the slain to feed on
Yeah, well
as we attack.
but the passage that got me to make my comment there, to write my comment was, this is Lan quoting here.
Mm.
There are too many Trollocs, Lan said. The leaders of the Dark One's armies have been breeding them for years. So this is not just the border the blight was quiet and then they popped them, then they all just like the orcs in Mordor, they came out of a pod all at once.
Yeah.
This was something that's been going on. And yeah, you talked about towns and stuff, but I mean, even still, we didn't get any impression that those towns are being raided by Trolloc or
Yeah.
by Trollocs at all. In fact, they seem like they belong there. And with the Red Aiel, they probably would kill any Trollocs that came in that area to come after them for food.
Well, it's been about 2.5 years since the Eye of the World,
Hmm.
and that's when things started to go quiet. So it could have been then is when they really ramped up the Trolloc breeding. Because all right, well, we're at the end game here. Now it's time to get ready for the last battle.
It just, I don't know. I just overthink the resource aspect of that because just like we talked about with Dune, I'm like, what do these
Mhm.
things eat? These giant things. Well, of course, I mean, if Trollocs can figure out a way to eat the worms in the blight, then there's plenty of food there. But from what we got in Eye of the World, even Trollocs were scared of them. So,
Yeah, they run away.
you know,
Yeah.
you know.
Yep. Um, I to me, I feel it's like I think I talked about this when I talked about after I went and saw the movie Maverick. Um, it is very easy to pick apart the plot of Maverick, and after I watched it, I went and watched some videos that I'd been ignoring of former actual Top Gun pilots talking about the movie, and a couple of them made this point of, yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense. We would actually use this or that to do a mission like this,
Hmm.
but they do just enough in the movie to make it plausible, so then you can suspend your disbelief and just watch a movie. Just
Hmm.
it's a story, right? So to me, I feel like this is analogous to that, that there's just enough there that I can suspend disbelief and not be knocked out of the fantasy setting.
Hmm.
That I can just enjoy the fiction and take it as real.
Yeah, well, I guess my only thing is, to me, and this started way back in book five, it just everything ramped up in scale so
Mhm.
fast that you could never go
Now,
back.
now that I agree with is that
Yeah.
the scaling to me was inevitable and necessary when, especially once you get to the last battle and you
Hmm.
see the numbers that the dark has it at its disposal. It was inevitable and it was necessary, but I do agree it happened too fast.
Hmm.
That we didn't get a nice steady building up. That once we get to, you know, the Aiel and the Battle of Karheen, it's like we have gone from dozens to hundreds to hundreds of thousands
Hmm.
very quickly.
Very, very, very quickly, almost
Yeah.
almost over the course of a quarter of a book,
Mhm.
realistically. Yeah.
Yeah, like the until the battles of Rand's Aiel, the biggest battle I think we see is Emmons Field,
Hmm.
where you have, you know, maybe 1,000 humans versus 10,000 Trollocs.
Well, and there's also a little bit of bouncing back and forth too, because when you have Perrin staring down the White Cloaks, it's actually very believable numbers, couple thousand on each side. And these were conglomerates of several armies in Perrin's army.
Hmm.
This was
Hmm.
Maine, Perrin's Two Rivers people, and the Geldian army. And then the White Cloaks is supposed to be a big monolith anyways. So, it would make sense that their one sect would be the size of three. And it was a very believable number on both sides.
Yeah. But the point I was trying to get to here, my main takeaway from this land scene, other than it's a pretty good action sequence written by Sanderson here.
Hmm.
And you get to the point where he's fighting two Murdral. And I like, one, that Land gets this great moment here, and two, that he even impresses the other Borderlanders who are Borderlanders and have been fighting these Trollocs for weeks, if not months at this point.
Hmm.
I feel like it's been 4 to 6 weeks that the last battle has been going on at this point.
Well,
Um,
and even a general of of a borderland army, so he would be exposed to the best of the best
mhm, mhm.
that
Yeah,
they had to
yeah,
offer. Yeah.
yeah. I think Prince Kaisel is the one who, like, it makes the point of, holy crap, did you see that? Yeah, yeah, it is. But right before that, I like that I've pointed this out before, is that every once in a while Jordan would invert the show not tell. He would tell you and then he would show you. And I think this is that one of those moments, and it works really well, is that Lan is demonstrating what Tam was telling Rand. Because there's this great line here on page 328 for me. Um, it's when he realizes that there's a second fade. Uh, The two fades attacked, one from each side. The void did not shake. A sword could not feel fear. And for that moment, Lan was the sword. And this is in the moment of combat, but this is what Tam was talking about. The void is not a sword technique, but a method of navigating life. Because if you are overwhelmed by the pressures of life, if you are overwhelmed by the emotions that are triggered from the pressures of life, the natural ebb and flow of life, you're not going to be able to make it. You need to be able to, let me let me zen this so I can think, okay, what's going on here? Why am I feeling this emotion? How do I react? What do I do so that, oh, I thought I was facing one problem and now I'm facing two problems. That's okay. I can still do this.
Hmm. Well, also in a healthy mental state, going to the psychological realm, control is one of the big five motivating factors. This is in social psychology, but it's in general as well. Control is one of the things that we seek to navigate life, and people do it in different ways, but in general. And when something unexpected happens, we'll call that a second fade, something unexpected, you you revert, if you're in a healthy mental state, you revert to perception, to increasing your perception of your surroundings in an effort to regain control. And so now he is analyzing everything around himself, which is again healthy mental state. That's what the void is. You have no preconceived notions in the void. You are basically just uh, interacting with everything around you as it is, not how you want it to be.
Mm,
Where he is the sword, the only want he has is not die, right? Maybe even that, maybe not even that. Maybe just do the thing is
mhm.
the only want he has. How it happens, in what manner it happens, that those are all preconceived notions. But that's out the window because he's in a situation where he can't force the result. He can only force what his body does. And that's where the healthy mental state comes in. I can only do me. Everything else is a byproduct of that around me.
Yep. Um, uh, and then we get to chapter 17 and we get back to Matt
Oh God.
after his evening rendezvous with his lovely wife. All
Yep, yep, yep.
right. So my first note is several pages in when Rand shows up. Do you have any opening thoughts here?
Mm, I did, but then I took it back because my initial thought was the on the nakedness.
Hmm.
We have previous text, and it still kind of blends into that. We have previous text from other books, and I think a lot of it from Aegean's point of view, uh, that Davakal exist, and they're naked most of the time, but they're also that way to separate them from proper people. Because in the Shanshan's eyes, they're no more than animals.
Hmm.
That they're naked because they don't deserve clothes. They don't.
They are
They should.
property. Yeah.
Yeah, they're property. They don't. They don't. They shouldn't care about clothes just as much as my dog doesn't want to put on pants. Right? They are animals. So
Or Freddie.
I pointed at Hamilton when I did that, but whatever. In fact, if you try to put pants on him, he would reject it. But that's
Yeah.
actually that was purposefully in the mental state that I'm thinking I remember I read
No, you're right.
to actually separate them from proper people, what she would call proper people in her head, and then you get the top of proper people here. I kind of took back that thought a little bit because she talks about how he's averting his eyes and she has to have these people in her bath or whatever, but it's just the way it like set up there. She should have dressed right away instead of just sitting there undressed, even if they're sitting there averting their eyes.
Yeah, she cannot care that they're around when they had their hanky panky and then while she's getting dressed, but it does seem out of place and out of character for her to just sit there naked and not care.
And have her lover sit there, lay there naked in front of the same people because yeah, he's not the empress, but he's not Davakal either.
Hmm.
So he is a human. He
Hmm.
he is he is a Shanshan. He is the Prince of Ravens. Whatever you want to say, he is
I,
not
I
this thing that should be separated in your mind.
I think that ties into one of my annoyances, which is when Rand does show up and he says, "Thank you for leading me to her." He's not that stupid.
Yeah.
He knows what that would do. He knows the problem that would cause. It's done so we could have this silly moment of you know,
Where they're a not as serious adventure movie where
yeah,
Indiana Jones
yeah.
is bantering with his dad while they're in front of a hangman's noose, you know?
It's the new Dungeons and Dragons movie, or the latest
Yeah,
one with
and
Chris
that was supposed
Pine,
to be
and
that way. Yeah.
it's supposed to be that way. It's supposed there's some heart to it. There's way more heart than I was expecting, because it really is a story about a dad and his daughter. So it's got some great heart to it, but it's not a serious movie. I mean, and it's that way on purpose. Is that and that to me that is where the best not serious movies are, is when there's a core heart to it, where okay, we're not taking ourselves too seriously, but there is something serious here, which is a dad trying to get his life together and get his daughter back. But we're just gonna have fun and have some laughs here. But it makes the laughs more impactful when there's a good core there. So the laughs aren't as impactful here because it's stupid. So like, I want to have this silly moment. I want to have I'm gonna put Matt in this awkward situation because Matt in an awkward situation is loads of fun.
I'm gonna make a meme for this one. I'm gonna pick some of the banter lines and yeah, we're gonna have a fresh
First time,
meme for this one. Yeah.
first
Which
time.
which I'm still proud of my COVID lockdown one. We're all gonna be alcoholics after this lockdown. First time, huh?
Uh, um, but let me back up a step though, because my first note was actually it jumped out at me because we were kind of ranting about this and talking about this. I know we did when it was whiskey o'clock, but I think we talked about this last time when we were bitching and moaning so much about the Matt chapters. Um there was a moment here where you could have had a great character moment for both Rand and Matt, because and Sanderson actually points it out, what we were talking about, which is that think back, and this is important, literally the last time Matt and Rand met in person, Rand was kind of was going off the deep end. It was when he sent Matt off to Saladar to get Elaine and Egwene and Nynaeve, and make sure Elaine makes it to Camelin to assume the throne.
Mhm.
That was literally the last time they saw each other, and that was when Rand was starting to lose it. I mean, like really lose it, because in that moment, Matt is thinking about how he's, you know, there were moments where he's Rand, and then he would just kind of rant and rave, and he would go off on these tangents, and he was clearly unsettled. Okay, and but Matt still being Matt and Rand being his friend, Matt still pushed back and he tried to argue. And then it became clear that Rand wasn't going to budge, so he's like, "Oh, fine, whatever." Okay? Well, you could have brought that full circle, and with Matt expecting a repeat of that, and then oh, this is different.
Mhm.
This isn't the same Rand. And frickin' Sanderson references that here at the top. For me, it's the top of page 336. So it's just a couple pages in from the start of the chapter. Anyway, seeing Rand in person was different. It had been light. How long had it been? The last time I saw him with my own eyes was when he sent me to Saladar after Elaine. That felt like an eternity ago. It had been before he had come to Ibadar, before he had seen the Golem for the first time, before Thailand, before Tawan. He sets it up, but are you going to do anything with it? No, he's not. Because even he sets it up. He sets it up for that moment of, wow, you've changed. Because, wow, I've changed.
Mhm.
Think about how much Matt has been through, but himself, and then multiply that by 10 because Rand is the Dragon Reborn. So how much has he been through? That was before the box. That was before his head really started to swell because he became king of Ilion. That was that was before the true power. That was before losing his hand. That was heck, I skipped over the frickin' cleansing of Sidon.
Mhm.
And then
Don't worry, Rand point brought that up in his
and then uh and then he has this epiphany and this self-actualization moment. All of that has happened for Rand, and all the stuff that Matt just thought about has happened with Matt. They're different people. You know, they've gone through these trials and tribulations, and Rand kind of fell over and then picked himself back up and is now standing even taller, whereas Matt just kind of grew to be more Matt, which is kind of his point, as you've pointed out with Perrin and Matt, and then Rand kind of in between them to form the three legs of to hold up the stool. Is that is the role that Matt plays, and Rand needed to learn a bit of that, needed to learn how to be a little bit more like Matt, but also still be Perrin, but also still be himself. So you've referenced this, but then you do nothing with it. No, instead, we get this on the next page, we get this silly banter back
Hmm.
and forth of, well, I did this, well, I did that. And it's so awkward because you're like, what's happening? I mean,
Yeah,
you've got
to
Tuvan there, you've got Seleucia there, you've got the Death Watch guard there, and they're just kind of standing there watching this.
to me, it's very like parallel to, and this would be, kind of Sanderson's timeline and in how he's influenced. It's very parallel to like moments in the Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, where Legolas and Gimli are counting up their bodies as they're going, even the body count as they're going. Why did three? That counts as two, that kind of stuff in the middle of a battle, which kind of works in a movie that has already a little bit of that silliness to
Mm-hmm.
it. But it doesn't work in an epic fantasy going leading up to the climax between it just didn't it doesn't play.
Yeah. Well, and one of the other reasons it works in Two Towers and Return of the King is because Jackson and Tolkien before him didn't flagellate that deceased equine. There were moments of it, and then we moved on and we had other stuff and we had some serious stuff. And so yeah, I think Jackson goes a little too far, but
Mhm.
he doesn't go so far to ruin it. And the best moment of that is that only counts as one, is because of all the seriousness that had happened before then.
Well, we talk about Matt's inner thoughts and how conversations go too far and stuff. I'll give one from Two Towers. Uh, that was super cringe because it was just a thought that I guess they thought was funny at the time and it just didn't play, but it kept going.
Mm-hmm.
Was when they were running. All of them were running because they were going to find the two hobbits that got pulled away, Pippin and Merry,
Yeah.
and the long monologue from Gimli about dwarves are natural sprinters. We're not made for long distances, and it just kept that monologue kept going and going for like what 5 minutes, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just like, okay, too much, too
Yeah.
much,
Yeah.
quote unquote comic relief. And you
Yep.
get so many moments of that with this closing of the boys as they come together and just trying to be funny and entertaining and not reading the crowd.
A great example of that is actually my next note, because I had a thought here several pages in when Rand starts singing.
Well, my note on that was we talked about how it would have been nice to have the Aiel and the Ogier have a singing moment, and we get a little bit of that here, but then like you said, with the other thing, it goes nowhere after this. It makes for a moment, but it doesn't become part of the story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but even before, so that that is frustrating on the long term. In the short term, it's annoying because, oh, for crying out loud, let it go. If you really wanted this, you could have had Matt think it. He didn't have to say out loud, I swear I've heard that tune somewhere once. Is it two maids at the edge of the water? You're not helping, Rand whispered. Quiet. Like, come on. You just let it breathe, man. Let it breathe. And the silliness of it, the inappropriateness of it, and the Matt's not a moron.
Hmm.
Matt is flippant. Matt is cavalier. He's not stupid. Same thing with Rand. It was the very beginning of thank you for leading me to her. He's not stupid. He himself is a freaking emperor. You know, just you have this great moment actually where you show how Rand is not stupid when he has this back and forth with Tuan of where does your authority come from? And then he says that is actually in a vacuum, that little bit right there is a fantastic moment of I'm freaking loose there in Telamon. I summoned the rods of Dominion. I bore the ring of the Tamarill, blah 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 blah. In a vacuum, that's a great moment where he basically, and Tuwan's no dummy either. So I like that Sanderson writes that she knows he's up to something, but she can't see where he's going. She just knows he's going somewhere she doesn't, that's not good for her. So she's trying to deflect and she can't. In a vacuum, that's a great moment. The problem is we had 2 pages of silliness, of nonsense before that. And just like here, and then right after it, we have this moment of silliness where Rand's trying to do something very serious here, very incredible, and you're going to break it up with Matt being a doofus.
Mm-hmm.
Matt knows the stakes here. He's not a moron. Um, and
It's
so
one of the big problems with the newer Star Wars movies. You keep having people like Finn come in and just be dumb.
mm,
And it's like it's supposed to be, be the break in the seriousness for some comic relief. And it's like, why am I rooting for the stupid guy to win?
the droids worked in the original trilogy as comic relief because they were they were still serious in their own minds. The same reason Liam Neeson, who was until Airplane, was a accomplished dramatic actor. That's why he worked in that movie, is because he was dead serious, saying silly things.
I mean, Leslie
Don't call me
Nielsen,
Shirley. I,
Leslie Nielsen.
I said Liam Neeson. Yeah.
I kind of knew, but I was like, well, maybe was Liam Neeson in Airplane?
Nope.
I don't
No.
know.
All right. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Leslie
Leslie
Nielsen.
Nielsen. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is why. But then actually, that's a good analogy. So look at Leslie Nielsen in Airplane, and then he did a few more because it was so big. He did a few more comedic movies. So the first Naked Gun,
Hmm.
but then it starts to get more and more ridiculous. That's what Matt is in the Sanderson books. Is Matt worked because he was Airplane and Naked Gun, the first Naked Gun, and then Sanderson comes in and he doesn't know how to replicate that, and he's typecasting Matt. So like Leslie Nielsen became typecast after Airplane and Naked Gun, and he started to make more and more of these movies that didn't work because he was being ridiculous. He wasn't being the dead straight deadpan, which the contrast is what made that so funny.
Yeah, well, and even with Matt from the beginning, he was never trying to be a comic. He was he was the hold my beer guy. I think this is gonna work. Let me try that. Hold my beer. You're thinking like his moment with the fireworks, where he's just like, well, I wonder if this works. I wonder if that. You know what? I bet you. Hold on. Let me stuff this in this arrow slit here and see what happens. You know, hold my beer, because that could have
Mm-hmm.
gone way wrong, and it wasn't really all right, but it worked out. And that was the moments where you're like having a little comedy here, where he he was blown over by that blast, but because of his luck, he fell straight onto the wall instead of falling to the side in one shape or form or something.
Mm-hmm.
All of these little things that were just like, let me try this. And you're sitting there going, oh, let me get some popcorn. Let's see how this is going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
Where now it's like he's forcing it. He's like, I'm going to tell you the funny.
And we have a very serious moment here in this moment because not only is this incredible what Rand is doing, but to your point, it's holy crap, it's the song, capital S. And you should be thinking, are we Rand knows the song. He was
Mhm.
alive when it was being used. Are
And we
are
never get the Tinkers again.
are we going to see a return of the song? How is this going to impact the future? There's also
Especially
another
since all the Tinkers are here in Ibudar.
there's also, and Rand has already visited them when
Which makes me wonder
before
if there was a
he came here to destroy
miscommunication
it.
with the notes here because I bet you Jordan had all the Tinkers in Ibudar. Rand is going to go to Ibudar to get Matt and da 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 da. And there was supposed to be the song gets to the Tinkers because that would have been a big player in what comes
Mhm.
after the healing of the land.
There's another thought here that I had in this moment, which is when he's manipulating the pattern, and he kind of talks about Rand talks about it a little bit of how he's doing what he's doing, that he can manipulate the pattern similar to how he can wield the power. Is the song part of that, or is that something separate? I'm curious about that mechanism, but it all gets lost in the nonsense. It's like we should be going, oh, whoa, check this out, man. Instead, we're going, that, yeah, come on, man, stop,
Well,
stop.
since everything's wavelengths, so it makes sense that the song would be part of that. But
That's true.
come
Um,
on, he's got those vibes, man.
but then on the next page, after all of that frustration, I feel like he really puts the last nail in his own coffin as far as his ability to write Matt, because on page 341, on the very next page, it I just about threw my book out the window. Um, when Rand is making this offer to Tawan, and Matt goes to her and says, "Look at me, Tawan, look at me. You can trust Rand al'Thor with the world itself." For fuck's sake, then why didn't Matt?
Mm-hmm.
He ran away to get away from Rand.
Which is, yeah, that was one thing we kind of skimmed over. We complained last time we talked about Matt about how Matt wouldn't have run away
Mm-hmm.
in this development of his character. He doubled down on it here by
Mm-hmm.
voicing it from Matt's own mouth. I did all these things to get away from you.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sanderson did the dumb and then doubled down on the dumb.
I did all these things to get away from you, but oh,
And then
Tawan.
completely contradicted what he did to,
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
jeez.
yeah.
This is so. Uh, we're gonna get to a point that you've been referencing several times since we've been in this book. That Matt does something that is really out of character and stupid, and I had been saying that I think this scene in Ibudar is worse, and I specifically meant this scene, this chapter of the Rand Matt moment is so terrible. And so I said this when we were talking over the weekend, is I actually think the Rand Perrin moment moments are really good, and it enhances both characters of what they've been through and who they've become from when we first see them in the Eye of the World. That Rand Perrin moment when they're just sitting there having a drink and talking to each other, and then later when they're at the fields of Marilor, and Rand is presenting the dragon's peace, and it's Perrin who is there to help his friend and kind of pick up the slack, because this is his thing. He's the blacksmith, he's the builder, and Moraine is the one who presents the idea, but then Perrin, being the blacksmith, is the one who figures is the engineer, and Moraine is the physicist, and Perrin is the one who figures out, okay, well, this is how we can actually build that. And it's so pivotal and integral and necessary that Perrin is there. And then we get to Rand and Matt, and because Sanderson is so terrible with Matt, he brings Rand down too. He'd
Mm-hmm.
been pretty good with his Rand scenes, and now we get to this moment, and it's like you just forgot everything that has happened. It's like that this is not the same Rand from the previous two books, because it's not Matt. This is some facsimile, and you're trying so hard that it even it that you're ruining Matt, and you're ruining him so bad that you also ruin Rand in this moment and make him a goofball as well. Um, I actually last like the last couple of line in a vacuum. Again, the problem with the Matt chapters that is that they're in a vacuum. There are moments where it's like, hey, that's good. The problem is you have 3 pages of crap on either side of that paragraph or half a page of, hey, that was good. So it gets buried in the feces. It's like this. What is that stupidly fancy coffee that is literally pooped out? So it's the coffee beans in the scat.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Um, but the chapter ends with, by the way, I saved Moraine. Chew on that as you try to decide which of the two of us is winning. Matt followed Tawan, and behind him rose the laughter of the dragon reborn. That would be a great way to end that interaction in that chapter if you hadn't had so much crap that you had to pick through to get out that coffee seed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's like the best rescuing of all of that stuff, but at the same time, it's just upsetting that it's there because it never should have had to be there.
Yeah, yeah. If we'd have had, I mean, nothing was going to be perfect. Nothing was going to be like Jordan did it because he's not Jordan and he shouldn't be expected to be Jordan. But he should be expected to be better than this.
Yeah.
And we see moments when I like his Avienda point of views. We don't get a lot of them, but I thought he was really good with her. I didn't like the Nakami stuff, and I ranted about that. But
Well, and I disagreed
the
with
her
you
as a
on that
character.
with her getting jiggy with Rand again scenes. I think it was way
Well,
contrived.
I think that was the his inability to write humor,
Mm-hmm.
inability, or he's not as funny as he thinks he is. Something like that. Because
Yeah.
it's very that moment of the her getting jiggy with it with Rand, that was a bit awkward. But to me, it worked because it should have been awkward because
Yeah,
of
but it
how
wasn't
Avianda's
awkward in
character.
that sweet to
Mhm,
inexperienced lovers awkward. It was awkward in the okay, we're past this.
mhm, mhm. Um, oh, I think we need to pause a second here because we're halfway through and we have to go to Gawain now.
Yeah.
So it's not going to get better.
Well, I may have a silver lining on this one.
Okay. All right. So get a refill, deep breath, pour, ideals, pour yourself some more vodka.
But he doesn't
Scott.
drink, remember?
Oh, that's right. Are
I
you
don't
even
think
Russian,
Scott
bro?
drinks either.
I don't, I'm starting to wonder if you're actually Russian. What's going
Well,
on here?
yeah, I think Scott said he doesn't drink either, which is funny because our two biggest fans to social distillation are non-drinkers. Maybe
Yeah. Well, pour yourself some extra sweet tea then, because we've got Gawain, and we were talking about this because when I read this, it just kind of hit me, and I went, wait a minute. Um, I'm wondering, not only does Sanderson not only dislike Egwene greatly, and that's why he writes her as such an awful person, um, but is he a Gawain fan? Is he like the one guy in the fandom that actually liked Gawain? Because
I think because he was writing himself.
I've kind of touched on this before of I really feel like he's trying really hard to rehabilitate Gawain and as well as Gawain individually, but then Gawain and Egwene as a couple and their arc or what passes for an arc here. Um, because if you just look at like an outline of the character and of the character arc, if you just looked at it in an outline form, I feel like you would say Gawain should be, if not likable, at least understandable because of what I've referenced before of Uncle Iroh, one of the great characters from one of the great TV shows, Avatar: The Last Airbender, is shame is not the opposite of anger, but its source. Why? Because shame leads to anger through frustration, which was a bit of an epiphany that you kind of came out of nowhere and
Yeah,
said, I don't remember when,
he
is that
used
it's
the wrong word. It's resentment, but
so
yeah.
um frustration builds to anger. Um, and you can see where Gawain would be frustrated, where the circumstances of his life.
Well, let's sock you back to the beginning of this talk. Frustration leads to hastiness
Mm, that's it.
because
What
you
did he
start
do
trying
during
to
the tower
make
tower
things
coup?
happen.
Yeah.
You
What
start
did you
trying
do?
to
What did he
make.
do during the tower coup? He hastily ran to fight
Hmm.
without thinking who, what, where, when, why, what's going on here. And then everything from there, which we get, is it Knife of Dreams when he finally says this is enough and leaves,
Yeah.
and leaves the younglings, is I've been reacting. I have not been acting. So he finally has that epiphany, but it's too late. And he's still acting like a moron too much, because there's this several pages in, uh, page 347 for me, on chapter 18 here, is he has this thought, because it's his point of view here, and it's at the top of 347 for me here. He knew he was needed, and what he did was important, but he couldn't help feeling wasted. He was one of the finest swordsmen in the army, and he stood on the battlefield for a few hours a day, killing only the occasional Trollocs stupid enough to charge two Aes Sedai. What Gawain did was more like putting them out of their misery than fighting them. And when we were listening, was it Coleman Hughes? Yeah. With Peterson has mentioned this a number of
Hmm.
times, and it cuts me deep, Shrek, of high IQ, low achieving creates an incredible amount of resentment. And that's what's going on with Gawain here. Not
Well,
necessarily
and
IQ, but ability.
when we talk relationships, that's why it's so important that it does take on the form of more of a partnership, uh, than on either side a subordinate to one another. And in his growing up moment that Sanderson thought he had with him, he became a subordinate. And now he's hit the resentment phase of, well, she's not using me properly, but you made that happen. And this is okay. We can go Peterson here because this is what one of the reasons why he's so big on. He said, I'm a very agreeable person. I hate conflict, but we do things on the front side in our marriage because if you don't do it now, it becomes a problem the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did on the front side of that was he gave in just to get along, go along with getting along. And when you go give in to go along to getting along, when it becomes problems later, you resent that person for the situation you're in.
That's a
And
really good point, because we kind of skimmed over the fact that they're actually married now. They're not just Warder and Aes
mhm.
Sedai. It's you know, back several chapters ago, when the Aes Sedai army first starts fighting, and it's from Egwene's point of view about how they were married now. They had secretly and privately, in a small little ceremony with it. It sounds like just, her parents and a few other people. They were married.
Yeah, and so this is actually a lesson for people like myself, and this is what Peterson talks about, but it's actually in the literature. He's not pulling this from his ass. It's just
Hmm.
where we first heard it, basically,
Yeah.
is when you're a very agreeable person, the downside to being agreeable, it's easy to be social and it's easy to get along with people, but the downside is it can lead to resentment because you acquiesce when you should have said no. And that's where we are now. He
Hmm.
acquiesced to every demand of hers. Now, the fault goes both ways because she forced it. She said, "You want to be with me, you got to be this way."
She gave him an ultimatum, which is never good.
Yes, never good. And had he stood up as a man, as a human being, a strong-willed human being, he it still may have worked out for him in the long run. We don't know. We got a counterfactual there,
Hmm.
but he didn't. And
Yeah.
he took the road that inevitably leads to this. And this is standard human social psychology 101. And Sanderson hit it on the nail here in this chapter, I think. That's what you talk about, hating Gawain. I think it's because Sanderson actually did a good job
Mm,
in this chapter. And you actually see some tidbits of wisdom in Gawain when he's trying to work it out in his head.
hmm
You brought up one side where he's resentful, but then he kind of thinks about his own resentment. And there's one point where he talks about Rand, and he's like, oh, okay, well, she is young. So the paragraph before that, it's 378 for me, but it's right after they leave Brian's tent. So if
hmm
you know where that is in your version, and she kind of slumps in his arms for a second and then
Yeah.
gets back to propriety. And he said, of course, she wasn't much younger than Althor himself. Gawain was pleased and a little surprised that thinking of the man did not provoke any anger. Althor would fight his fight. Really, what the man did was none of Gawain's business. Finally, in one plot line, he grew up,
hmm
but he's put himself in this position so much that it's the guy who spends so much money on a girl and she doesn't put out at the end, right? He's mad. He's double mad because I tried so hard and I did this thing that I thought was going to work. Well, guess what, buddy? You never made your intentions clear from the beginning. And if you're just hoping a thing happens because you put in effort, or put in perceived effort, I should say, you weren't on the same page to begin with, and him and Egwene were never on the same page. She wanted an errand boy, and he wanted to be a partner and a protector. They never agreed on that. Through all of the stupid shit they went through, they never agreed on that, but they got together.
hmm
And that's going to lead to resentment on his side. And that's going to lead to her using him in a way that makes him resentful. It's a two-way street, and they're both guilty.
Yeah. And I think the biggest example on Gawain's side is kind of last time we saw them when he had insisted she go and sleep in the tower because it was safer, because she needed a full night's sleep. And then she starts berating him for looking through her letters. And he should have stood up for himself and said, hold on a second. We're in private now. We're in
Mm-hmm.
private, honey. Stop that. You're not the Amarillan. You're my Aes Sedai and my wife. Stop it. I need to be able to do stuff for you, and you can trust me. But there should have been a callback to what Brian was trying to teach him, which was know what she needs is someone she can trust with her whole heart and mind.
Mm-hmm.
To know that if she tells you, hey, I need you to take care of this, that it's going to get taken care of. But even more importantly, that you'll see things before she tells you and take care of it.
Well, and even
There could have been
further
a
in that,
callback
in
to
this
that.
section, we have a moment of how circular it gets. He doesn't trust her to trust him because
Yeah.
of those things.
Yeah.
And we look at the rings he's got.
Mm,
He won't bring this to her because he can't look her in the eye as the simp he is and say, "Hey, I know these things are dangerous, and I know you've got a trigger here, but the reason they're dangerous may save our lives one day
hmm
because I may have to protect you beyond my abilities. And by the way, I have fought these guys."
hmm
And if he had the balls and the trust to say that to her, trusting that she would see some wisdom in that logic, that actually would have been a good conversation for them to have. But instead, we have subterfuge. And take notes, everyone, because this is beyond Wheel of Time. This is almost exactly why so many marriages fail because both partners are not honest with each other in the long run because they don't trust that their partner is going to react in a proper way.
So here's a thought that I've kind of talked around this before, and it just kind of really solidified here in this moment of Gawain himself and Gawain plus Egwene as a couple would be a good tragic story that I understand, even though I don't sympathize. That's why Thanos works so well as the ultimate villain in the MCU is because towards the end there, as they approached Infinity War and Endgame, you got to know him and understand him. And oh no, what you're doing is still evil, but I understand you. And that makes an incredible villain. That so when he throws uh Gamora off the cliff, it hurts. It's wrong. He's still a bad guy, but it hurts and you can feel his pain, right? So I think because we're about to my next note here, because we're about to switch to a Rand chapter, is about there's this interesting parallel between the two of them, between Gawain and Rand. And so I think this would have landed better if we had a more fleshed out and impactful Rand Elaine relationship.
Hmm.
Because I think we're supposed to see that because this everything that Gawain Egwene do wrong, Rand and Elaine do more right. Not perfect, but more right. And that's how they're able to have a better relationship and have a happy ending, and Gawain and Egwene aren't. The problem is we don't get enough of a contrast because we don't get enough of Rand and Elaine. We've kind of griped about this before. That is one of the few failings in Jordan's writings is that we get a great relationship between Rand and Min, but he's got three girls. Where are the other two? Why
Yeah,
don't why
well,
don't we
and
have the same level of depth there?
well, yeah, we started in book 3, and then the end of the well, no, we started in the beginning of book 4 with Elaine and Rand, but we're left with a chapter and a half basically of that to
Mm-hmm.
try to carry that story all the way to the end until we get to Jiggy time where he's butting heads with his twin babies. You know, as Isomorphic would put it, you
Not
know.
heads. They haven't turned yet.
Yes.
He's just tickling their feet.
We don't know how they're in there, but it's yeah, we have those just like a chapter and a half from that, but from book 4 to pull from for that whole thing, where she just reminisces on him every once in a while, and he reminisces on her, and then they get together and make the babies, and then they get together and uh, refreshingly kind of make, you know, do the thing again. So it's like you're not pulling from a whole lot. We
Mm-hmm.
needed more of her in his life and the development, but that would have taken away from her adventures with Egwene and Nynaeve and how she developed in that way. So it would almost have been better if she was the one to go to the waste with Rand instead of, and Egwene go with Nynaeve. It just so there's so
Yeah,
many things that would have gone
but
into
he
that,
needed
and
Egwene to be the dreamer, so
yeah, what
um,
to be the Amiralin later. So it's just kind of from a relationship standpoint, it would have been better. It does seem a little contrived to have this little moment of kissy time in the stone develop into a relationship like that, especially since you're way out of the window of the initial
mhm.
chemical reactions that go on there.
Yeah, and
You know.
because frankly, it makes more sense that his relationship with Elaine would have turned out like his relationship with Egwene, because that's basically how him and Egwene started with their puppy love in Emmons Field,
Hmm.
and then they grew apart, and then they were apart, which solidified that growing apart.
And if you
And
really wanted to make it like real life, he Rand would have been serially monogamous. He would have been.
mhm, mhm.
Hold on. Am I back?
Oh, there you are.
All right, sorry for the mic issue. I still have that stupid cord. But no, it would have been puppy love with Egwene when they were too young to do anything about it. Now puppy love with Elaine when he falls into a garden with a princess, and then they meet
Mhm,
up again in the Stone of Tear and they're kissy kissy. And then puppy love with Avienda in the Waste. And then puppy love with, oh, that girl I met and she was kind of hot and now she's like all up in my business, but she's really cool too. And
mhm,
it would have actually gone like that in real life versus I still have this thing for these people that, that's what do they call that effect? The alpha widow effect, where they can't get rid of
mm.
the thought of a past lover, or something. So it's more complicated than that, but that's kind of like the basis of it. But he does that with three people,
Hmm.
except one of them doesn't go away for the whole last part of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
But
it
okay, so
makes
let me
more
say
sense.
yes and with your point. Your point is focusing on the good with Rand and Elaine. With Gawain and Egwene, the problem here is I kind of see what he's trying to do is I think there is supposed to be that marital strife that's leading to bad decisions,
Hmm.
but you have to be at a point where you're rooting for both of them for that to work. And all we got was a kind of a shitty Gawain for so long. And Egwene has her moments, but then she's kind of pretty shitty in a lot of ways too. You're actually like, well, I just don't care if they make it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, you deserve each other. Fuck it, have this toxic relationship, you know? Whereas if we were rooting for both of them, like Matt and
Yes.
Tuan, we root for both of them, even though they were really awkward with each other for so long and not on the same page, and they're still not quite on the same page. You're still like, come on, Matt, don't be dumb.
Yeah.
And Tuan, don't be so stuck in your ways. Come on, just find a middle ground here. And
Yeah.
you as the audience is kind of doing that, and you don't get that with Gawain and Egwene. You just get, yeah, you deserve each other, people.
Yeah. Um, but the kind of the very opening of the switch to Rand's point of view is where I was like, oh yeah, I think he is trying to draw a parallel and make us have sympathy with Gawain because the opening, the opening half page here is Rand essentially feeling the need to do something. And so he has this thought where he's gone to join Elaine's army, but he's got the mirror of mist on, so he looks like Jer Grady, and he's throwing out walls of fire, and it's kind of disturbing, but also, yeah, I wasn't going to bitch and moan, but I will a little bit. I wish Jordan would have written this section because I feel like the actual combat veteran would have put so much more pathos into this because he's been there, done that.
Hmm.
Of there is that human part of you that feels like I shouldn't enjoy this. On the other hand, these things are literal monsters. And Rand has this thought of he could remember being Luz Theron and growing to enjoy the sound of dying Trollocs.
Hmm.
Be- why? Because where is it? He
You
says
want me to give you the
he
studied answer, or do you
hold on.
want
The
the
line
philosophy?
from the book here is he had loved that sound. It had always made him feel like he were doing something. And that is when it kind of clicked. And I thought, yeah, I think Sanderson is really trying to make us feel sympathy for Gawain because here Rand is able to do something and Gawain is tied down and restrained and he can't do more. And he feels like I can do more. I should do more, but I can't. I'm unable to, even though I have the capability to. And now we immediately switch to Rand, who has those same feelings, but then is able to act on them.
Yeah, rewind just a second, just a finer point. I think Sanderson doesn't realize how hard it is to chop off a limb. Uh, the Ogier, it's believable because they're immensely big and strong.
Yeah.
Land doing it when he's fighting the Murdral is believable because got a power rot sword, right? It's not just that he's land, it's that he has a power rot sword too.
Mhm.
This thing he doesn't need to sharpen. They talk about it many times that
Yeah.
he sharpens it out of habit, but it's basically this super razor blade, right? Gawain doesn't have a power rot sword.
So far as
And
we know, no. Yeah.
and he's using his weapon one-handed and he chops through a Trollocs arm, which is going to be the equivalent of my thigh, right? And it's two bones because it's the arm, right? So it's like I don't think Sanderson understands. He watches too many movies where they cut off a head with ease. No, usually what happens is you get stuck and you have to keep chopping to get through. So
Yeah.
it's not that easy to cut off a limb, and this limb is double what a normal limb is. But it's a cool moment in his fighting
People
ability.
going to the headsman back in the day would tip the headsman.
Hmm.
to encourage him to make it through in one clean stroke. That is one of the reasons the guillotine was invented.
And that's with every physics advantage you can have in cutting off
Mhm.
a piece of the body. Okay, that was
Yeah.
sorry, a little sidebar, but yeah.
Well, so there's the moment where Rand is fighting, and I go, oh yeah, I think he's really trying hard to make this connection, draw this parallel between Rand and Gawain, but there's been too much crap for me to care. To your point, because they're awful, they deserve each other. Y'all just whatever. Then we get to this Cadsuan scene we've been referencing, and so
Hmm.
I assume you have thoughts. Um, I like what she says here, which for me is on page 355 of when she's talking about the you can't. I don't think. I mean, she may have heard the concept, but I doubt because they're so closed mouthed and this isn't her. I mean, she's not a Brown. Her focus has been the dragon and the last battle. So I doubt she understands the Aiel concept of embracing death, but she's basically um Rand has finished his undergraduate. Now she's helping him with the graduate work in the idea.
Hmm.
So he understands it a lot better than he used to when he was nihilistic and fatalistic, but he still hasn't fully grasped it. And that's what she's saying here, which is that where is it?
Well, he's just now putting it into practice.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Even if it is nearly inevitable, you must not take it as completely inevitable. And the thought I had is um that it's like pursuing perfection. You can't. You know it's unattainable, but that shouldn't stop you from trying. So long as you understand that I'll never be perfect, whether wholly as an individual or in a particular pursuit, so long as you understand that, but then you need to have that in the back of your mind so that you don't become frustrated and resentful, but also in the back of your mind so it doesn't stop you from continuing to push yourself. And it's kind of the inverse of that idea here with the fatalism of if you are certain that this is going to happen, then it's going to happen.
Hmm.
You need to push that into the back of your mind and have the front of your mind being, you know what, maybe somehow I come through this.
Well, I mean, it's the old back a dog into a corner thing. The corner exists and you're not getting out of it, but that should spur a greater fight in you
Mm-hmm.
than just the same fight that was there to begin with when the corner didn't exist. So he's not she's making sure he still has that fight in him and not just accepting the end result before
Yeah,
anything happens.
yeah, yeah. Have that fight in you. I do love the because we were just talking about Elaine. Rand's response is Elaine said much the same thing. Then she has spoken wisdom at least once in her life, a better average than I had assumed from that one.
Which,
Oh,
if you've heard our bitching and moaning in the last several books, is right about right. You know, Brigitte would have busted out laughing at that comment. You know,
yeah, yeah. All right. Do you have any more thoughts on this the cats? Well, I kind of skipped over Min here. So
yeah. Well, just kind of back to our point about a lot of things is this is a good little moment for men, but we could have used that exact same thing consistently over time.
mm,
And since Herod fell and basically Jordan not being able to continue this, Min just jumps back in every once in a while instead of providing a constant source of, well, what do you think about this? Or this thing that you think should be, well, maybe not. She should have been our Chesterton's fence the
mm.
whole time.
Yeah, and we do have moments of that. Like it is, I think it's in book 7 when he goes out to the rebels. I think it is because I think he says this to Moraine's cousin about balance, or she says it when they're complaining about all the terrible things that happen around Rand.
Hmm.
And she points out there are good things too. The pattern is balance. And so she has that way back then, but I do appreciate your point that it's not consistent enough, that it's like boom, she just jumps in every once in a while. And it's at least she's there, so you know she's there, so you can infer that there's more going on there, but it would have been nice to see a little bit more.
Well, like you said, everything is balance. You could have continued that same thought with Rand and Moiraine, and she didn't even have to be there. Rand could have thought in his head about
That's a
something
good
Min
point. Yeah.
meant,
Yeah. Yeah.
Min talked about, and you actually in for a long time, several books, you don't you see Rand thinking about Elaine, you see Rand thinking about Avienda, but you very rarely see him thinking about Min and what she means in the whole
Hmm.
tripod of the relationship.
And I assume that's because Jordan needed to make sure he pulled these two back in because we see Min so much, but
Mhm.
it would have been nice to see Min in Rand's thoughts because she should be. If he loves all three of these women equally, then they should all be in his thoughts.
You could have even reused lines with an epiphany moment for Rand saying, I say that a lot, kind of thing, where when Moiraine says, well, can you even, or is it even a good idea to kill the Dark One? You could have had him use he uses right here. Elaine would have said the same thing to Catswin. He could have said to Moiraine, well, Min would have said the same thing. You could
Or
have
even
that,
thought it. Yeah.
yeah, you could even have that same line happen over and over again. And then that person go, wait a minute, I've just said that 3 times about 3 different people that just so happen to be my 3 different lovers.
Mhm.
Maybe I should have a consensus thought from this group of people that I respect a lot. Respect enough to call them my significant others, basically.
Mhm. Any more thoughts before we move on to lands section, which ends the chapter here?
No, because I think what did I got to make sense of one of my I just said foreshadowing for to a spoiler. What was I?
Is that with Lan thinking about Deep and how Lan couldn't say he would turn down a similar opportunity if it were given him?
Yes, that was it.
That's interesting because that was the only note I had on this land section, and I don't want to get into the spoilery territory for anyone who's still reading along, but
But if you've read to the end, you know what we're talking about.
my thought was, is this, and I don't know if I've had this thought before, is this setup or is it foreshadowing? Because they aren't necessarily the same thing. And I feel
I
like this is
think the
simply
Murdral fight
foreshadowing, but
was the
it's not
setup
setup. Hmm.
because it's a thing that makes that thing more believable.
And it's whole, even Prince Kaisel was, holy crap, did you see that?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Um, but
But it did
I don't
make
know.
me think of something that we had speculated in our other ones. We haven't done a spoiler part in a long time.
Hmm.
Uh, let's just do it right here because we're basically on the last book, so very few spoilers. So if you haven't read to the end of the book, give us like 20 seconds. I need to read further. So here's the spoilers, jazz hands. I need to pay attention when we get to Galad fighting Demandred
Hmm.
because did Demandred cheat with the power to win? Was that the difference?
I
Or
think
did he
so.
beat him in a fair fight?
No, I
Because
think
our
he cheated.
complaint with that was that Galad should have been the one to do that. But I thought about it further reading this part that if he cheated with the power, that makes it make more sense and makes
I,
it more
I, I think
impactful.
he cheats with
Yeah.
one or both of them, Galad and Gawain. One or both of them he does.
Yeah.
And then Lan has the medallion,
Yeah. So
so he
so the thing is,
can't.
okay, so if Galad was besting him before he cheated, then that actually makes it a little bit better than what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Okay, no spoilers anymore. Jazz hands if you're
All
watching.
right, come
Go.
back. So we'll keep an eye on that because it's been a bit since I've read through, and now that I'm thinking in this train of thought, I'll think about that when we get to that scene and see does it work better for me now that we have talked all this out? Because
Well, still would have
before it
been
was
best with
meh.
Abel.
Absolutely. All right. Um, and if Abel was Androl, he could have should have been there, and it would anyway. Um,
Well, the more we read this one, the more I like Andrel, so I'm actually kind of cool with the new
Yeah,
character. Yeah.
the character works but it's just frustrating that we got, hold on, we're at the very end here and you're introducing, not only introducing a new character, but introducing someone who's pretty important to how things play out. Um, uh, oh, well, I mean, speaking of, is we left Cadsuin, and Cadsuin has to be the one to tell Rand, now the Black Tower has worked itself out.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
and to me, that came out of nowhere. You're,
that needed
uh,
more. That there needed to be some follow up there. There needed to be
or
some.
or a brief paragraph, Cadsuin point of view, where she's getting a letter, and it like getting a letter, and it doesn't even tell you what it is, but she's
Mhm,
shocked, and then this was the reveal. So we didn't even know that's what she got then, but this is the reveal to it.
mhm,
And that would have been, it could have been just a 3 paragraph thing, which we got with a couple with Maureen's point of view earlier. So, Sanderson does it every once in a while. He could have had Cadsuin going through her notes and then, oh, mundane, 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 more of this, more of this. Holy crap.
mhm.
I need to talk to Rand, you know?
Yeah. All right. Last chapter we're going to talk about chapter 19. Um, I didn't have any thoughts on the first section, which is Elaine and Bashir. In fact, I don't have any thoughts until we get to Matt because there's a couple of sections before
My
that.
my thought was a Sanderson thing. And one of the things we praise Jordan on with battle planning and with the fights themselves is a lot of times he would give you a little intro and then just leave it vague so you can make up what you wanted in your head. Because I mean, he was a veteran, but at the same time, he knows he's not a master general.
Mm,
But Sanderson tries to be too detailed in the plans and everything, and you're thinking in your head is like, well, maybe that sounds kind of cool, but you don't have the mind for that, or else you would be that person, right?
mhm,
You're not Mattis up there, leading armies because you don't know how to do that. And if it was just a little random skirmish of two, fealty, feudal manners or something, that's one thing you can get away with it. But this is supposed to be one of the great captains, and he's giving his full plan, and Sanderson feels the need to give us the full
mhm.
detailed dissertation of the whole thing. And that's why it keeps falling flat to me because I'm like, yeah, leave it
Yeah,
vague. Leave it vague.
yeah, yeah. Figs and mice.
Yeah.
Um, I don't have any specific thoughts, but then it switches to Egwene, and I do find it interesting that we get a second perspective because we've seen it a little bit from Perrin when he goes into the wolf dream of the world is falling apart, and it is shocking and more evident in the world of dreams. I did
Mhm.
find that interesting. Like there is a storm, a wind blowing so hard that has worn down the city walls of Tyr. It's like, wow, that's a big deal. It's like it is because it is supposed to be a reflection of the world. So what is that it's a reflection
But
of?
it's also the dream world. So, which would make it a reflection of the collective consciousness.
Mm,
It would make it a reflection of the collective
that's something I hadn't thought
perspective
of.
and uh, perception. It would be the collect and how many people are dying?
Mm,
How many people from Tyr are dead right now? Now, it does make a point to point out that the Stone of Tyr looks good, but also the things that are newer and more malleable in the real world are going to be more likely to be affected quickly when all these people are dying. So the walls that are hundreds of years old, with modifications here and there and all
mhm,
this,
mhm,
the stone that's been there since the breaking of the world and is an icon to everybody in the world because they've seen pictures and books and stuff versus the things that have been going up and down throughout the years, and 10 people dying could affect how it is reflected in the world of dreams. So the world of dreams is I mean, all dreams are is your consciousness sorting itself out, defragging overnight, basically. And if those data points are being winked out on a daily basis, thousands at a time, it would make sense that the whole structure that's based on that
Hmm.
is falling apart. And the
Yeah.
more solid parts would be the ones that were collectively more ingrained in the collective consciousness. My next note is just a little funny because
Well, give us some funny because I don't have a lot of funny with the end of chapter 19 because it's back to Matt.
oh, this is before that when Rand
Okay.
goes to Gawain and Egwene, and
Yes.
Gawain is like, Galad, you're Galad's brother,
Hmm.
half brother. And then he makes a point to saying, we had the same mother. His father, like yours, was Taringel, but
Hmm.
mine was an Aiel. And it was okay. So here's my note that I just scribbled because I was in a mood and I needed some fun. Pornhub, Pornhub has made millions on the stepbrother sister fantasy. Oh, Jordan, you dog.
I like the yeah, I hate to be the one to tell you your own family history, but me and Elaine aren't related. Um that that was amusing and he did it well because unlike with Matt when he's trying to be funny, he didn't beat the dead horse. But I did have a problem with it because it actually obscures a more real moment, which is Godwin saying, I think Gollum might surprise you.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
when
yeah.
Rand says, yeah, I don't think the leader of the White Cloaks wants to, find out that he's my half brother so we can sit down and say get to know each other is basically what Rand says and
Hmm.
or implies and Godwin says, yeah, I think Gollum might surprise you. That's a freaking deep line.
Hmm.
Especially considering how much of what we know of Galad came from Elaine bitching and moaning about him, complaining about him. And then we actually get to know the guy and we're like, actually, I kind of like him. And that is a a point in Godwin's favor is that Godwin knows this. Godwin is not nearly as biased and antagonistic towards Galad as Elaine is. And I don't think anything ever comes of it. I'll have to keep an eye out, but it's really frustrating that wait, Gawain knows, and yet somehow this information never gets to Galad. That's really annoying. But what's more annoying is that then we get back to Matt. All right,
Hmm.
I'm gonna get up on my soapbox for, and I've said this before, so I won't belabor the point that I seriously think that the rise in anxiety disorders amongst young people is correlated to a rise in narcissism. Because the reason you're anxious is because you think everyone is looking at you and thinking about you. No, you're not. No, they're not. You're not that important. Sanderson makes Matt a narcissist in this first page because Matt is thinking about how annoying it is to have all these people looking at him. To me, Sanderson is making Matt a narcissist and he's not.
Hmm. Yeah. Uh, I see what he's trying to do, but I will agree with you that he missed the nail with the hammer because he's speaking to a paranoia rather than a narcissism.
Mm,
Because he talks about the boy that filched the pie now and again.
hmm.
Like, why do I get all this attention? You know, I do something bad once and everybody comes down on me, but Rand does the same thing and it's like, oh, he just messed up,
Oh,
you
you
know?
rapscallion. Gosh
Yeah.
darn you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this is a paranoia of the criminal. The problem is we're not supposed to have Matt a criminal. He was a guy that did fun things and pulled pranks. And yes, that does give you special attention when all the adults figure out who the person who pulls the pranks are all the time. But I mean, he just hits it wrong. It just doesn't feel right. It it's a paranoia that should be gone by now.
Hmm.
I think he's taking a caricature of Matt from The Eye of the World, the badger and the flower on the
The
dogs.
flower and the dogs. Yeah, I was just thinking
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. So he's trying to use that, invoke that to have a funny scene and try to identify with Matt better because remember he said he was actively trying to do that for this
Hmm.
book. But no, you took all the growth and development out when you did that.
Yeah.
So yeah, in this late stage, it looks like just pure narcissism. Where in an early stage, it would be paranoia of the prankster, which is actually a benefit. That could be a skill for him because those with the negativity bias to danger are really good at navigating through danger, like he
Hmm.
did in his fight with Couladin, because he was hyper aware of the battle in order to try to get away from the battle, but ended up winning the battle. That was the great irony there, right?
Yeah.
He's
And
trying to invoke that, but he's trying to do it with words instead of do it with situation.
so there's this concept in writing, especially for screen and plays, is to hang a lampshade on something. Like if there's something that is incongruous, to you can sometimes get away with it if you point it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have the character say, if this is a dumb plan, well, if you have the character say this is a dumb plan, then it can sometimes help you get away with it. The problem is Sanderson does that all the time with everything practically on every page with Matt. And so a couple pages in on page 372 here for me, there's this line of nobody liked a complainer, least of all Matt. And of course, Matt is always bitching and moaning about things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's ha ha. To your point, you use the word that I think we've used before, which is the problem with Matt is that he's a caricature. He's not a character when Sanderson
Mm-hmm.
writes him. And yeah, he's bitching and moaning, he's complaining, but he's not a complainer. He's just pointing out facts as he sees them. But also he's still doing the thing. That's why I went and I read those couple of lines from The Dragon Reborn last time, is because that's Matt. Is he didn't even realize he was moving until he was in the air, jumping down to save this strange woman. Because
Mm-hmm.
by golly, you don't pull a knife on a woman, not when I'm around. But
And which is funny.
holy
This is
crap, this is stupid.
to go back to my point about he would never have tried to escape at this point in his development. Aludra,
Yeah.
yeah, Aludra is a representation of an ideal. I am going to save this helpless, what I deem to be helpless person. At this point in his development, where he has become a general and a leader of armies, helpless person becomes everybody dying from the the evil that is taking over this world. And he would have been grumbling and mumbling the whole time as he dove down to save the world from this thing, because that's just where he is now. It is the same person, different scale. It would have basically taken his character trait and scaled it up to the moment. And what we got instead was moment happened, I ran away, and Rand brought me back.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did Rand bring me back, Rand brought my wife into this, and now she's making me do it, which is actually counter to Matt's character.
Um,
Wife making me do it versus I'm doing the right thing
yep.
is not the same thing.
Yep. And this is what is so frustrating about it, is because on the very next page is another moment where Sanderson accidentally gets Matt perfect, but then he doesn't make that connection to the core of his character, which is I'm brain farting here. What was the innkeeper's name from Ibadar?
Satella Anon?
Yeah,
Yeah.
when he has the conversation with her about boots, and it's
Yeah.
almost good, but then Sanderson flubs it up by trying too hard to make the ha ha. To me, this moment connects back to that. And it should connect in the mind of all or most readers, except that Sanderson flubbed that scene so terribly, which is on the surface level, Matt knows that he's technically a noble now, but this is the moment where it sinks in and he truly realizes it. And why is that a problem? So for me, it's on the bottom of page 373 here. He sat there letting them lacquer his fingernails as he considered what this all meant. Oh, he had not needed to worry about money for some time, as he could always gamble for more. This was different. If he already had everything, what point was there to gambling? This did not sound like much fun. People were not supposed to give you things like this. You were supposed to find a way to come to them by yourself, by wits, luck, or skill. Burn me, Matt said, lowering his arms to his side as the lacquering finished. I'm a bloody nobleman. So this is the moment where it really sinks in as he accepts it. And why has he been fighting against it so much? Because at his core, Matt thinks you get what you earn, and you earn what you work for.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with nobles is that they are given everything.
Yeah, but this would have been a good time to reflect on how he actually earned Tuan's hand in marriage.
You know,
Or he brings up Ptolemy's earlier in a snarky way of how maybe I can get the army to move in with me in this big giant place. How Ptolemy's, as a noble who was given everything, still earned his respect.
yeah,
And how it could be done. You could have had a growth moment there. He's like, everything's given to me, but I still have things to earn. Again, the moment now is so big compared to where he started. He has plenty to earn. First of all, saving the world. That's a pretty big thing.
a little bit.
A little bit, a little bit. So yeah, you could have continued with that, but I think Sanderson knew the underlying thought pattern, but he doesn't know how to do something with it.
Mm.
You know, well, we've talked about him. We talk about narcissism and things. One thing he does, you've pointed this out, is pump out a lot of volume.
Oh yeah.
And that is something you can reflect on. Is I earned my spot in this book because of the hard work I do, but I don't think he gets it. I think he just keeps pumping out volume to be constantly getting the attention of people reading the volume. It's like people who tweet all day, right? They're you brought up the narcissism aspect. It's how many likes I get, how many shares I get, how many retweets, how many of this, how many of that. No, no, no. You're good at volume. You pump out this stuff. Bask in the effect of it a little bit in, oh, well, I did work hard for this. And you can too. Uh yeah. It's a good moment, but again, one of those good moments that doesn't play out. What is my
Yep.
note here?
I was
5.
just, you brought up volume, so I just looked it up. According on his Wikipedia page, Sanderson wrote consistently through his undergraduate and graduate studies. By 2003, he had written 12 novels, though no publisher had accepted any of them for publication. While in the middle of a graduate program at BYU, he was contacted by Tor Books, who wanted to acquire one of his books. Sanderson had submitted the manuscript of his sixth novel, Elantris, a year and a half earlier. I believe that was one of the ones I read because um, when it was announced that he was going to finish the series, I think that was the one Tor made available as a free ebook for anyone who didn't know who Brandon Sanderson was. And I don't remember anything about that book, but I know I have it on my phone. So, okay. Anyway, uh, that is the end of chapter 19. We will have more bitching and moaning of Matt to complain about as he starts to assume the role that he shouldn't have been running away from in the first place, as the as general in the last battle.
Yeah, sorry about the length here, giggity. But there was just so many different back and forths in this one, and each one of them had their own meta point to talk about, really.
Yeah, well, but
So,
yeah, because we had a lot of the things we complain about, um, with Sanderson, which is Matt, and then we've been complaining about both with Jordan and Sanderson, which is Goblin and Egwene. So we
mhm.
had quite a bit of both in this one.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I had now, and we'll try to pump out another one this week. If not, I'm gonna break this one up into two parts because it's long.
Dude.
Yeah. Oh, Tor. You brought up Tor. Let me postulate one thing. You had brought up that Jordan handpicked and Harriet handpicked Sanderson. But if he was a Tor publisher and one of their more volume creating ones,
Mhm.
how much do we trust that it was Harriet and Jordan versus Tor, who probably owned the rights?
Or Tor, who recommended it, and then they said, "Okay, yeah, yeah, this works."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I hadn't thought about that before.
It wouldn't be the first time bureaucracy screwed something good up.
Wow, because that's I had not put all that together because I'm looking at the timeline here. Elantris was published by Tor in April of 2005, and this was followed in 2006 by Mistborn, which was the first in his fantasy trilogy. And I do remember reading that one, and it's interesting, but also weird. Um, so that was 2006. So, um,
Because realistically, you look at this from an economic standpoint. Uh, Tor could have had those 12 books you talked about under rights, as well
mhm,
as anything new coming out, and said, you know what, we can make this guy famous real quick, and then we can
mhm,
release all these.
mhm. Yeah, the boy, I hadn't thought about that before, but I hadn't looked at the timeline before because it's been so long. I didn't remember the I didn't remember how long ago it was when they revealed what Jordan was suffering from and that he might not make it to the end, which was amyloidosis. And I forgot how long ago that was and how we're such old, grumpy old men. But Sanderson's first book was published in 2005, and then 2006 and 2007 they published because he'd already had the books written, so they didn't really have to do much except some editing and then publish. So he had 3 books published in 3 years, and then it was in late 2007 when Harriet announced that Sanderson had been chosen to complete the final books of the series. So he wasn't as known as I thought he was before Wheel of Time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that does make me go, ugh. Yeah, how much of this was Jordan's and how much of this was Jordan choosing because it was put in front of him by Tor
Mm-hmm.
of, hey, this guy would be good. Why don't you choose him
Or I mean,
to
it's
finish
not
it?
like we have receipts of the conversation. It could have been like, well, I have to read more of this, and then he dies. And Harriet not knowing the real story,
Mhm.
or basically being like, do you want these published or not? Do you want to finish
Yeah.
this? Here's the guy
Oh,
we got
geez.
for you.
Yeah.
You know,
Because that was
it
so it
wouldn't be the
just
first, it wouldn't be the first, we see this in the music industry. It wouldn't be the first manufactured fame that ever existed.
um yeah, he died in September 16th, 2007. So uh and the Sanderson just Wikipedia page just says late 2007, so it doesn't say when exactly that was announced.
So the whole line on it being given to you and not earning anything, is that projection?
Maybe.
Well, from Sanderson's perspective, I can see him 100% believing I do all this writing and I think I'm good, I earned it. So, I mean, the person who benefits from it can still be the pawn.
Mhm.
in a bigger picture. Because again, they got a wealth of his writing that they could own and say, hey, you're the next big thing here. Now you're famous. Boom. All your books just sold, 400% more.
Yeah. I mean, and there's not to batter the guy too much because there is an element of that.
Oh,
Like
dude,
for instance,
this isn't battering Sanderson at all. This is battering the
yeah,
machine that is these big publishing companies.
because back in the day when the Tonight Show was the late night show, yeah, there were others, but they were second place was so far behind. It was Carson. Period. Well, if you could get on Carson as a stand-up comic, you would blow up.
Hmm.
So there was an element of, well, he blew up because he got on Carson. Well, yeah, but he still had to nail it. He still
Hmm.
had to be good enough to get Carson's attention and good enough to get on the show and then good enough to make the audience laugh and
Well,
and
why do
hit
all
it
these
big.
authors go on Joe Rogan for free? Because they go on Joe Rogan and talk about their book, and they just increase their
Yeah.
sales by 1,500%.
Mhm. Yep, yep, yep.
All right.
Well, bitching, moaning. Oh, we are done yelling at the clouds for now. We will maybe do some more later.
All right. Yeah, I got to get to work here in about 20 minutes. All right. We'll see you next time. Hopefully this week for another Wheel of Time. Uh, we'll figure out what we can do.